I've been interested in classical music for over 50 years, and I'm always looking for unfamiliar composers. One of the unexpected benefits of lockdown has been the discovery of little-known composer Arlecchino Rassino. As with many other Italian prisoners of war, Rassino was able to stay in Britain after the war was over. Largely self-taught and oblivious of the musical traditions of his adopted country, he pursued a path quite different to any of the trends of the time. Perhaps his greatest contribution is the reduction of opera to the simplest elements. What does the word opera convey to most of us? Maybe a piece of music on a large scale, up to 17 hours in the case of Wagner's Ring Cycle, with a large cast, orchestra and chorus, and therefore very expensive to stage. At the other extreme, Rassino was able to write an opera which condenses a story into just one voice, without instrumental accompaniment, and lasting maybe 5 minutes. This reduces the cost of an operatic production enormously. The choice of the first story for such an adaptation was one of those happy accidents which are common in the arts world. On a Wednesday afternoon in 1955, he stumbled across an episode of The Flowerpot Men on BBC TV. By then he spoke quite good English and was initially confused by the sudden change to what he thought was a dialect. He then realised that he could use the sound of the Flowerpot Men language in a musical way, much like Arthur Bliss had done 30 years previously with his setting of nonsense words in his Rout of 1920. As in Italian, he was also able to introduce more subtle instructions in his scores to expand on the familiar adagio, andante, presto, etc. So you will find instructions like these: adagio gelato, andante cappuccino, largo al pacino, molto crescendo e bolognese, adorning the staves of his music. As far as I can ascertain, performances of these pieces have been rare in recent times. Therefore I think it is worth exploring again the genius of Arlecchino Rassino. Here is Flowerpot Men. Once upon a time there was a little house, but with a large garden. The man who looked after the garden worked hard in the morning. He dug and planted. He watered it with his hose pipe. By midday he had worked up an appetite. I could eat a horse, he said to himself, because there was no one else around to talk to, as far as he knew. So he went inside the little house to have his lunch. Back in the garden there were all sorts of things lying around. There were lots of different sized flower pots. There were tiny flower pots, medium-sized flower pots, and then there were 2 really big flower pots. Between these 2 pots there grew a weed, and inside the flower pots lived 2 funny little men, who only came out when the man was having his lunch. They were called Bill and Ben, the Flowerpot Men. "Slog it up," said Bill. "Slog it up," said Ben. "Plotter-a-pop-up," said Bill, roughly translated as "What shall we do today?" They decided to have a game of what shall we say, hide and seek. So the 2 Flowerpot Men hid in the garden and thought to themselves how clever they were. Hop-a-da-pop-pop, hop-pop-pop, top-a-top-pop-pop-pop-pop-pop, stop-a-da-pop-pop, said Bill to himself, how clever I am, and Ben started searching for him. Hop-a-pop-a-top-a-top-a-pop-pop-pop. I wonder where he is. I can't see him, I can't find him. But eventually he was discovered, hiding in the potting shed. Aha! And they laughed together. At the end of the adventure, they both went back into their flower pots, and the weed between the pots said, "Weed, little weed." Schlobber-hop, pop-pop-pop-pop. Schlogger-hop, pop-pop.